Welcome back. There's nothing more humbling. Well, probably is. But this was pretty humbling when I finished my game last night and thought, I did okay. I hung in there. And the game review says I have 11 blunders, as you can see on the screenshot from my app that I made right after the game. Now, fortunately, when I ran the review in the browser, which I will show you here, it says I only had 5 blunders. And that's the red number right here. And 1 missed win. Now, we know missed wins are just another form of blunder, so say 6 blunders. Well, 6 is pretty bad, but it's a lot better than 11, right? And also it said I had 4 great moves, so that should cancel out some of the blunders, maybe. But anyway, I'm going to just go to the blunders in this game and see if we can learn anything. Let's show this. And switch to this screen. Okay, now my first blunder came on move 5. This came out of the England Gambit, which is what some of my opponents have begun to play after I open with d4 and then they open with e4. I suppose it's a way to avoid all the Queen's Gambit declined or London systems, and it provides a more exciting game. And if the other player has studied their England Gambit and knows some of the lines, they know the kind of tricks that I will fall for, and it works sometimes. Well, here my opponent has checked me, which was a blunder on their part, but I've just always thought, the easiest way to block these checks is by moving the c-pawn up. But you know what that does? And that's what I did. That was my first blunder of the game. So the engine says I should play knight to c3. That makes sense, I guess, because what my opponent did after I played c3 to block the check was they got this pawn for free. And so my playing c3 did nothing except prolong my agony. Whereas if I had played knight to c3, that would have protected my back e-pawn, my rear e-pawn. I have 2 e-pawns now. From there, the knight would have protected that e-pawn as well as blocking the check. The downside is that it doesn't directly attack the queen like this does, which was my thinking, that this directly attacks the queen. But when you directly attack a piece, especially one as powerful as a queen, you need to think about where it's going to go next. That's my lesson I need to learn from this, because where it's going to go next is take a free pawn with check and then have plenty of places to escape from. So that was my first blunder, and I think I completely understand why that was a blunder, because knight to c3 is so much better. Okay, about 10 moves later, we're in this position. I ended up having to block the queen check on e4 with my queen, and we traded queens, and we got some quick development on both sides. And here my opponent has just launched another pawn. They've got all these pawns headed toward my position. And what I didn't notice here, what I failed to notice, is that this bishop only has one place it can move right now. And my opponent has just played this with, seemingly obviously coming right here. And my bishop then will be trapped, and I will lose it for a pawn. I didn't notice that, so what did I play instead? I played b4 instead. That was my second blunder of the game. I spent 12 seconds on that. Okay, well, what I should have played here was knight to c4, according to Stockfish. It's the only move that's not a mistake. Is knight to c4. That would have given my bishop room to run if the f-pawn continued to advance, so I understand that. But what the second best move is knight 4 to b3. That also would have given my bishop room to escape. Well, maybe not there. Maybe here. If I had first moved this knight over out of the way, and it would have protected the bishop going to c5, I guess. The downside of that is, of course, that it blocks the b-pawn. And I think that's probably what I was thinking, is that I did want to unleash the power of these bishops, but I wanted to put this here after I played b4. But before, okay, that was my second blunder of the game. And the problem is because of what my opponent played next, which is f4. This bishop can't go anywhere, so I'm going to lose the bishop. Okay, well, that one makes sense because I should notice before I played b4, especially if I'm going to spend 12 seconds on a move, whatever your opponent just moved, their last move, I mean, it's a good idea to always ask, like, why did they play that? I think when I looked at that, I just took this as a general pawn push. They're just pushing pawns on the king side since their king has gone over to the queen side and hidden, and all these pawns are just going to push toward my king. But I wasn't thinking specifically about that move and what it could do now, what it can allow. On the very next turn, they're going to complete their little pawn chain here, and my bishop's going to be trapped. So I definitely should have seen that. I don't know that I would have found that as the best move, but I definitely need to create space for my bishop. I don't know what's wrong with, okay, f3 is listed as my third best move. I think I might have played that had I noticed this was about to happen. That would have given my bishop room to move backward. But anyway, so that was my second blunder of the game. My third blunder came after move 30. My opponent has just placed their king here, which I don't remember if that was one of their better moves or not. As you can see, we've traded off a bunch of pieces. I managed to escape with almost even material here. Here my opponent is up one pawn, and they have one more pawn than I do. Otherwise, we're identical. We have same colored bishops. I have a huge advantage here with this passed pawn, one square from promotion. I just can't quite promote yet because they have two pieces guarding that square. But they have two passed pawns of their own, so that we're in an even position. And with careful play, we should be able to draw this. Okay, now you can see Stockfish's recommendation here, but what I played was bishop to c6. And I'm not in time trouble here. Yeah, you can see the clocks on the screen. One of my plans here was to win on time. I thought the position was fairly equal. I thought my threat of this passed pawn is going to keep both of their major pieces busy, especially with my rook right behind it. If they get one of those pieces away from defending that square, well, then I can promote, especially if they get the bishop off that diagonal. I could promote and get that rook basically for a pawn. And so I was kind of counting on that and pushing on that, and I was just trying to make, I guess, just quick moves here, hoping, because I'm a minute and a half ahead of my opponent. That was one of my plans at this point. And my idea for this was that I would get their bishop off that diagonal by trading it. If they did not take, this was my thinking, if they did not take, then I would have blocked their bishop from seeing this promotion square, and I could take them. I don't know what else they could have done. I guess they could have moved it off that way, and if they had done that, then I definitely would have promoted at that point. But if they had taken me, I would have taken them back. I assume at that point the rook would try to get in front of my pawn, but then I could get in front of their pawn. So that was my idea. That seemed like a good idea to me at the time. But what happens here is it's really bad. Apparently, I lose 2 points, 2.5 points of advantage. They did take me, which is what I expected they would do. And I took back, which now is my best move at the time. And they did what I thought they would do, which is put their rook behind the pawn. But it turns out to be a mistake for them to put the rook behind the pawn. Now, what they should have done here is come after my rook. I don't know what that would have accomplished, because I was going to put the rook back behind the pawn and then trade off for their rook. But anyway, it says they would have had an advantage had they come after my rook, and that Stockfish says I would have put it here, but I'm not going to follow the whole line out. But that turned out to be a blunder, and what Stockfish wanted me to do in this position was go to bishop c4. And that would have maintained an equality, it says. Now, I don't know. I guess it would have blockaded their c-pawn to keep it from advancing, because right now, I mean, they have two passed pawns and they're connected and they're both passed. So I guess I understand why that's so good. I just don't understand why this is so bad. It says F3 would have been pretty close to equality. You know what? That actually wouldn't have been that bad either, now that I think about it. That would have forced their bishop to do something. I don't know what it would have done. If it had gone anywhere along here, well, if it had gone there, I would have just taken it with my bishop. But if it had gone anywhere else on this diagonal, I could have then promoted. What would they have done if I had done this? It says they would have just gone back one. Okay. And then I would have just come back here. I don't know about all that. I think I would have been very tempted to go here. Oh, and Stockfish says that's okay. I would have been very tempted to go here, trying to go this way around their d-pawn, so I can then guard the promotion square. But it said we still would have been equal had that happened. Yeah, I don't think I would have seen this because I don't know what that does. But I would have seen F3, I guess, if I had thought about it. But I still don't know why that's bad. Maybe one of you, if you're watching, can explain it to me in the comments why there's such a difference between those two positions and why that loses the equality. And my third blunder was just a couple of moves later after we had the bishop trade, and I took the bishop, which is what I was supposed to do then, but my blunder was moving my bishop there in the first place. And then they made a mistake or a blunder by moving their rook back over here, and so I have the opportunity to keep equality, and it's this. That's my only move now. I see that. Okay. I thought my only chance was to keep guarding that pawn. I can't let it go, because look at this. I'm about to be mated if I let them take that pawn. Very briefly at this point, I considered taking their h-pawn, but then I thought, wait, they're going to take that, and I can't get back in time to block the mate. But this comes with check. I assume they would have come toward me at that point. It says that they probably would have. And then I could have gotten back behind my pawn, and I could have run back and forth on this file, keeping them from taking that pawn, I guess. And they wouldn't have had connected passed pawns anymore. Okay, I definitely understand why this was a blunder, but my thinking was, oh, I'm about to be back rank mated. And if I just do something like give myself an out here, then I've lost a pawn. But apparently the only move that maintains equality here is taking the pawn. But my blunder was getting back behind my pawn. Because now they can king to d5 and protect these two connected passed pawns, I guess, or herd them downward. Well, and also there would keep me from coming back to correct my mistake, I guess. Okay, I do understand that one. Definitely should have taken that pawn because it would have come with check, so they could not have taken this one. So had I taken with check, they would have had to go here or there. Those are the only two moves that maintain equality. Had they gone to e6, it would have given me a slight advantage. But look at the follow-up move up. You see Stockfish there above my head? No matter which one of those moves they make, I'm going to go back to a5 to protect my pawn. So my thinking was correct that I do need to protect that pawn once they went over there. I just didn't realize I could take their pawn and then go protect mine. Okay, that makes sense. Let's go on to the next blunder. Okay, here, after move 39, my opponent has a slight advantage at this point. I have managed to protect this pawn, but you might have noticed that these two pawns have each moved forward one square and their king is nestled in between them. My opponent has just moved here. One of us is trying to create passed pawns. I think they have a little bit of an advantage because those pawns are closer to my side than mine are to their side. And if, say, we somehow managed to each of us break through here, like if I broke through and they went here and I didn't take it, they're closer to my side. Not to mention this, that I'm trying to blockade with my king blockading this one and my rook pinning that one so it can't move. What did I play here? I took this pawn. Wait. That's my best move. You see that, right? Wait, am I misreading it? H captures G4. Right up there. Right. How did they count it as a blunder if it's my best move? Wait. Okay, the game review is at a lower depth. I do know that. So how many seconds did I spend on this move? 227 to 218? In 8 seconds, I made a move that was smarter than the game review on Stockfish. Because Stockfish on the game review said H4 is what I should have played. But I thought about this for whatever it said, 8 seconds, and thought, here I have a chance at a passed pawn. If my opponent takes, I can take here, and I have a passed pawn. And they're gonna have to defend against that passed pawn over there and this passed pawn. That's what I calculated. So I took, and Stockfish said that the game review said that was a blunder, but it's not. It was my best move. Okay, I mean my opponent still has an advantage. Obviously -4, whatever, but all the other moves would have been -7 or worse. Okay, well that's a huge sigh of relief. So I didn't have 5 blunders. Very nice. Okay, then my final blunder of the game came in this position, which we're back to equality again. You can see all those pawns that were there, including those 2 passed pawns that were over here. They're gone. Thank goodness. But we're back to equality. And here, I have several moves, according to Stockfish, that would maintain the equality. I thought I was losing here. I misread this position during the game because I remember. Look at the clock, though. You see my opponent's clock up there. 2.9 seconds. That plan worked. And that's how I won this game. Just spoiler alert, or, I had 50 seconds left and they had 2, and there's no increment. So, but here I wasn't being able to check their time every move. I knew I was ahead on time, but I thought I was lost positionally. I knew my rook was cutting off their king from getting back to protect this pawn. But if I went to attack that pawn, their king can just come back and protect it. And if I check them again, they're going to come back. I guess I could have hoped for a draw here. What I played was rook to c2. That's a bad idea. I see that now. Good grief. They can then just take my pawn with check. Yeah, okay. That's obvious. Rook to c2 was just bad. Yeah, they're supposed to take my pawn with check, which is what they did. And somehow my opponent, with only 1.7 seconds left, managed to make like 3 more moves before they ran out of time. Okay, but yeah, I see that now. I guess I was hoping that they would take, and I would take, and their king wouldn't be able to get around to get my pawn because my pawn covers that square. So that's what I was thinking. Maybe they wouldn't do that. They would take me, I would take, they would come back, and then I would come here. No, I would come here. I don't know what I was thinking. If they captured and I captured, I guess I was thinking that their king would head this way and I would head back, and then my king would be cutting off this square and my pawn's cutting off this square. And I was thinking at that point we could either get a draw or I might manage to get in here and take their pawn. But yeah, I just completely missed that they could do that, which is what they did. Okay, what was I supposed to have done? King to e3. Well, I didn't. I immediately rejected that move when I saw it during the game because they're just going to. And it says that they would, but I would be okay. It says they would take my pawn, but I would be fine. If I played king to e3, they would take my pawn with check, and then I would just go here, and everything would be fine. I get that. If they tried to check me, I would take their pawn. What would they do? They would come down here, and then what would I do? They would come down here, or here, and then I would check them. And if they went anywhere off that file, I would take that pawn. I obviously, I think. And then we would probably be in a drawn king and rook end game, although one of us could have easily messed that up. As you saw, both of us gave away huge advantages here and equality in this game over time. And that's what we ended up with. But yeah, I guess that's what I could have done. Okay, what was another thing I could have done? Here I could have, besides king to e4 or king to e3, oh, they're in a different order now. I could have played rook to c6, but then their king would have just come forward again. Oh, it says they wouldn't have. It says they would have went back. I don't know why they would have done that. I thought they would have come forward again to keep me from getting close to that pawn. I don't know. Okay. But you know what? This also said I had 4 great moves. So let's go take a look at those and see if they're great after all. Okay, we're back in this position, which you remember from earlier in the video, in which I got my bishop trapped because I had blundered on the previous move by playing this instead of giving my bishop an escape square. Okay, well, as soon as I saw that happen, I realized, oh no, my bishop is trapped. But I thought, what if I went, what do they call it, danger levels? And take this knight. And then, yeah, they could take my bishop, but then I can take the rook back there or go over here and check. Probably take the rook because the check, I would end up getting my knight trapped. But I don't know. I might come out okay on that. But nothing else made sense. I'm about to lose my bishop. I might as well get a piece for it, right? And also that gets out of the way so I can get away with my bishop. And Stockfish counted that as a great move. Was it my only move? Let's look at the evaluation. Yeah, it's my only move that's not at least a mistake. It says my second best move would be b5, which would at best be a mistake. Or knight to c4, which at best would be, that would probably be a blunder according to losing 2.5 points of evaluation. To me, that seemed like my only chance. I mean, I guess it's great that I thought of it instead of just going, oh no, I lost my bishop. Okay, what's the next great move? Okay, here on after move 22, my opponent has just captured something there. I don't remember what. What was I thinking here? Okay. I don't know. I think I was kind of in desperate straits. I remember considering pushing my h-pawn in order to put my bishop there. I thought that might be an interesting idea, pinning the bishop to its king. But I rejected it because I thought, you know what, they would just take me. And when I took back, then I would have doubled pawns. And yes, that extra pawn would be guarding or protecting both of those squares and helping to prevent the h-pawn push, but it wasn't great. And I thought I would love to take this pawn with check, but how to get rid of that pawn? And you know what? I could push this here. And it looks like I'm just giving them a free pawn. But if they take it, then I get the a pawn with check. And if they don't take it, say they move past, well, I still get the a pawn with check. And if they just leave it there, well, I'm going to take that pawn with check. And I assume the king would take back, but then oh no, I don't have a follow-up check. I might have messed that up. But anyway, playing c6 turned out to be counted as a great move. And Stockfish says, yeah, it's once again, it's the only move that's not at least an inaccuracy. My second best move would have been, okay, I don't feel so bad then. h3 is my second best move, and that was the other one I was considering. But that would have been at least inaccurate. And it says that if I had played that, the bishop would have gone here. In fact, it says that's what they should have done anyway. Look at that. Because when I played c6, they're supposed to play here protecting that square. But they didn't. They took with the pawn, which allowed me to do that. Okay, well, I get why that was a great move. What was the next one? Okay, here we're on move 35. My opponent, this is before we traded off all those pawns, my opponent has pushed one of those pawns, checking me. I don't remember if that was their best move or not, but I do know that I've only got a couple of choices here with my king. Obviously, don't know what the engine says, but I can't go forward because their pawn's guarding that square. I can go here, although I don't know why I would do that. I can go here, 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 or there. Those are my only choices, and only one of those makes any sense at all to me, right? Obviously you don't want to go away from that pawn because that pawn wants to promote. So that only leaves two choices. Well, and if I go here, what's to stop their king from coming down and then pushing that pawn? So I moved in front of it. But yeah, it called that a great move in the game review. I'm going to say that one wasn't great. The two previous ones, I think I was pretty proud of finding because it required a little bit of a, I don't know, devious mind or something. I was proud of finding those. This one just seems obvious. I've got to stop that pawn, and I've got to keep their king from getting any closer. Okay, what was my last great move? Okay, here you probably remember something very similar to this position from earlier. After we have traded off at least one of those pawns, I took it here. My opponent had advanced it with check, and I had taken that pawn, and then they don't remember exactly what happened. Oh no, I promoted first, and then they pushed that pawn to get my rook off so they could take my queen. Yeah, that's how that happened. Okay. But here, oh wow. Well, then I'm glad I found this one. Do you see the difference between the moves? My second best move, for some reason, is rook to c7, and that's minus 14. Usually there's not that much difference between the moves. I just thought this had to be obvious. Right now my opponent has two pawns, and I have one. And if we somehow trade off these rooks, which I assume my opponent is thinking hard about how to trade off these rooks, my king can't move back and forth fast enough to catch two pawns that are at least 2 ranks between them. I forget what that's called, but Daniel Naroditsky has a video where he talks about this. If it's just your king versus 2 pawns, if those 2 pawns are split like that far apart, they can use one of them as a decoy until you go over there, and then the other one advances. So, to me, this seemed fairly obvious that I had to take this, but that was my last great move. Not only is it a check, but it gets rid of that pawn. And that way now, if we ever do trade off the rooks, it's these 2 pawns, and as long as I can, get over here, they're going to get over there, and we're going to end up with the draw. And not to mention, as I said before, my opponent is already in time trouble here. But anyway, okay, this was a kind of a so-so video, I guess, because I learned something, I think, on a couple of these moves. I was pretty proud of a couple of the moves that I made during the game. I think I understand all or most of those blunders. Looks like there was... Oh, and one of them wasn't even a blunder. That did make me feel good. I actually made the best move. Just the game review wasn't running at a high enough depth to find out. Well, thank you for watching. I sure appreciate all the support, and we'll see you next time.